And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk at what they used to call Bird Stadium. I don't know what it's called now, but today, man, it was Michigan State's field, 27-24, coming back from a 7-point deficit 3 times. Jonathan Kim, end of the first half, field goal to go up 17-14, end of the game. 1 second left, pressure-packed field goal, made it look like no problem. And Michigan State, it's a win, 2-0. New team, new year, new era. Jonathan Smith, this team's reflecting him and his staff in a big way. Michigan State far from perfect, a lot of screws to screw in, but just kept fighting back. A well-coached football team, flashing some talent with Childs and Marsh. Defense coming up when it needed to, changing pictures on defense, bringing that safety blitz on 3rd and 1 to get a stop. Michigan State football is building a winning brand again, Paul. Whether they would have won this game or not, it was going to take some time at some point, but that was a well-coached football team today, Paul.
Yeah, and guys did make mistakes. Like Aiden Childs had a huge monster game statistically, and he did a lot of good things, but he, 2 of his interceptions were completely unnecessary. Jonathan Smith said that they were footwork issues. The one where he overthrew, was it Marsh or Foster? I can't remember what it was, but that set up Maryland's first score, and then obviously the one where Masunis was wide open in the end zone, and he threw it so inaccurate that it almost looked like Masunis ran the wrong route, and
or he thought the other guy was just the wrong teammate,
right? And they were all wearing white helmets, so who knows? But lots of people made mistakes, but everybody contributed. And, like for years, throughout the Mel Tucker era, we heard all phases of the game nonstop. They got to make plays. And in this game, all phases of the game did make plays. And it was really impressive. And, we saw Mark D'Antonio when we were walking to the press conference, and he had a big smile on his face, as he should, because he's been around this program quite a bit with Jonathan Smith. But this is a kind of win that, that D'Antonio had several times where, while he was building that thing during his tenure. I think of some of those close games against evenly matched teams at Northwestern, where guys like Benny Fowler had to make a play late in the game, or a trick play here or there had to work, and it kind of reminded me of one of these games. But the thing that's different between those years and this year is D'Antonio didn't have to play a Big Ten team in the second game of the season. This was a game in 2008, at Cal, that they played. So yeah, and they lost that game. But you talk about mistakes that were made, but you're playing a Big Ten team that knows, that's well coached. And you look at Loxley's coaching staff, and there's some good coaches on there, and it's impressive. And they've got some good personnel. And for Michigan State to do this in this game, for defense to make plays at the end, you look at a guy like Chuck Brantley coming up with a huge interception. You look at Michigan State getting the ball back with 2 minutes left. I mean, it was pretty amazing that they were even able to score to tie the ball game up, but getting it back with enough time to march down the field, burn clock, and kick a field goal. Yeah. It's impressive. And I kind of wondered to myself if some of the adversity that they faced in week 1 at home wasn't such a bad thing, because it has a galvanizing effect. You're not in that situation for the first time. And Michigan State,
especially for the defense.
Maryland, unlike Michigan State, they had no issue with UConn. They rolled them, and they haven't experienced, sudden change. Mm-hmm. They haven't experienced, the adversity that Michigan State did in week 1. And Michigan State, on both sides of the ball, came up and made plays. But the defense did when it needed to. The offense did, and special teams as well.
I'll tell you, Maryland's the team, the program that's won 8 games in the last 2 years, which is not easy to do in the old Big Ten East. Won bowl games the last 2 years against North Carolina State, against Auburn. Had beaten Michigan State handily the last 2 years. But in this game, Michigan State had just as much belief as Maryland did. Now, maybe part of that's because you got all the new players, 61 new players. Not all of them traveled today. 43 new scholarship players. Not all of them were here today. But Cal Halliday was talking about, we got all these new players, but it seems like we've been together a long time. The camaraderie's better than it's been the last couple of years with all the new players. Talk about a new beginning. Tough task for the coaching staff to get it all to mix together, but they have mixed it together. And a part of that is the transfers they brought in are plus personalities. As Mark D'Antonio used to say, it seems like there are a lot of givers that they've brought in, not takers. And Michigan State down 7-0, came back, answered early, a real nice drive. Down 14-7, came back, took a 17-14 lead. That pass you're talking about when Masunis was open, 31 yards out, should have been a touchdown and a 10-point lead. And Michigan State could have taken control at that point. But that got away, and Maryland's got a lot of players. I mean, the quarterback's good. Ty Felton is an excellent receiver. He can fly. And Michigan State was having trouble matching up with him and trying to find ways to hide some things here and there. And just kind of got through. Felton 11 catches, 152 yards, but just kind of kept enough of a lid on him. Not all the time, but was unable to deliver the backbreaker. At Michigan State, on defense, bringing that safety blitz on 3rd and 1 to get the stop, force a field goal, which missed, which left the door open, kept it a 1-score game. Very next play, deep to Nick Marsh. So what, 77-yard touchdown?
77 yards.
And the same play that they had run early in the game for 57 yards, and 2-receiver route, maximum protection off of, under center, wide zone, threatening play action, because Michigan State's run game was not great, but good enough to make them honor it a little bit. And to think you go deep with explosives with old-fashioned under center, it's like Jonathan Smith says, they like to do common things in an uncommon way. A lot of that's old-school throwback stuff, but gosh, they were explosive, and it's just the beginning with Childs and Marsh. Childs was better than he was last week. Childs, interestingly and very candidly, said, last week I was scared, which is understandable. 18-year-old kid, first ever start at home. A lot of expectation and hope around him. He could probably feel that. Did not play his best last week. Didn't play his best this week, but played well enough. Came up big. The coaches were excited about the resiliency. But Childs admitting he was scared last week, but not this week. Still mad with himself about the interceptions. Like you said, Jonathan Smith said those two were just simple footwork leading to inaccuracy. So he's still a work in progress. And if Childs ever gets it all screwed in and tightened together, he's dangerous. And the offense will be building throughout the years. But the Big Ten better hope he doesn't get it all together, because he'll be a scary guy.
Yeah, I mean he's going to clean it up. But he is 18 years old, and you saw like the one play where he showed he was 18 years old more than any other play was at 3rd and 10. He has a scramble. He has the ability to make that play, and that would have been a huge play too. If he picks up that first down, they're still tied 17-17 at that time. If I'm not mistaken, he doesn't. He steps out of bounds.
He tried to reach the ball over and thought he was there. He knew he was close.
But if you get there, like a veteran quarterback's not going to reach for it in that situation. They're going to do what they need to do to get. And he showed some physicality and picking up a couple short yardage plays, but you're going to do what you got to do. Like, he needed to get that first down there.
He would have had to take a hit to get it.
Yeah, but he's got to. That's what you got to do in that situation. He didn't, and then Maryland, to their credit, marches down the field, and that's when they score their, I believe that's when they scored their go-ahead touchdown to go up 24-17. And I'm not saying that was an easy play necessarily, but that's a play that you've got to make if you want to win football games at a high level against conference opponents. And there were other plays in this game like that, but to his credit, he bounced back. And I want to go back to something that you were talking about a minute ago, what Cal Halliday said, and I think it's important because Jonathan Smith and the staff did a whole lot starting in the spring and tried to foster team chemistry, having players over to their houses, and then trying to get players to do the same thing. And so why does that matter? It matters in a situation like this when you go on the road and you've got 61 new players, but you grow as a family, and that's this is a huge victory early, not necessarily for the win in the win column. That's huge. In Michigan State's overall bowl picture at some point, but it's more important because it creates the family type atmosphere because you guys go together and work towards something together on the road, and it has a galvanizing effect. And it all goes back to like some of those team building things that they did in the spring, and they weren't lip service team building things. It wasn't like here's what you need to do to build a team at the player level, but as coaches we're not going to take part in it. So I think this has a chance to be a big deal, and I think right now it's probably time for you to plug Chupin Aluminum.
As well said. Good points there. Interestingly, the Michigan State players are fired up. I saw Nick Samak out here talking with Jonathan Smith, giving him a hug. Samak plays for the Ravens, right? He's in town, was at the game. He was hugging a lot of former teammates and hugging the new coach who he's never played for.
Right.
But Samak, you could tell he was excited about what's going on.
But he's a guy that has ownership in the program, right? I mean, that guy's, I think of some of the guys that wish they could have played for D'Antonio. They played for John L. Smith, and it didn't work out. But he's a guy that wanted to be here. There was a bunch of Michigan State fans here, and you look across the way, and this is a pretty apathetic football fan base. You and I know that it's tough to get around in the DMV area because of traffic and whatnot, but this is a good football team coming off three straight winning seasons, 3 straight bowl wins, and you'd expect more than a half-filled stadium, and this isn't one of the bigger stadiums in the Big Ten, but there was a good amount of Michigan State fans out here to the point where when they had some momentum going in the second half, you could hear the "Go Green, Go White" chants through the glass in the press box, and don't think for a second that didn't have an impact on those guys. And it was cool to see them celebrating with Michigan State fans, their family that was out here, because there's a lot more fans out here than you'd see it if they went to Iowa or if they went to Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
So Michigan State fans showed out, and I think it did help them, gave them a boost on the sideline.
Yeah, a lot of Michigan State fans on the Eastern Seaboard. And when the players were singing the fight song in front of the crowd, I'm not sure how many players know the fight song yet.
The fans were there, but the fans were there to help them along.
Right, right. Hey, just a few years ago, the state of Michigan ranked first in the nation for deposit container recycling. 90% of all purchased bottles and cans were being redeemed for their deposits. Today, only 73% are being redeemed in the state of Michigan. That means Michiganders are forfeiting $105 million every year in bottle and can deposits that are not being redeemed. This deficit is having a negative impact on our environment. When Michigan's recycling rate drops, it hurts the environment, it hurts industry, and it hurts all of us. Help the environment, help your state, help yourself, take them back. Take those bottles and cans back. They're your lakes, your roads, your beaches, and it's your dime, so take them back. It's worth your time, and everyone will benefit. Take them back. A message from Schupan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling and dedicated to the Michigan State Spartans. Speaking of dedication today, Michigan State, the run game, they tried to hammer it out, and they did enough on the ground. 130 yards rushing, 4.3 per, enough to make the defense respect it a little bit. But Jonathan Smith, he said, "Hey man, there's a lot more we can get there." His quote is, "There's a lot more meat left on the bone," unquote. He's a run-oriented guy. He wants to get that established. That was the staple of the Oregon State thing, and it's been below average last week, maybe average today. But doing it today without Christian Phillips at right guard, and Jonathan Smith said after the game that we probably won't see Phillips again the rest of the season. Man, I didn't see that coming. I thought that young man had a nice game last week in his first start. Really the first time he's ever played extended plays. I thought Big Dooley looked like a guy that was throwing his weight around in a positive way. Hate to hear that he's gone. Brocious played today. Fincher played at right guard also. They split it up there at right guard. Michigan State's thin on that offensive line. As much positivity that comes out of this and much belief that they can make something nice in this season, it's still thin on that offensive line and scary.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons they couldn't do as much as they wanted to do in the run game, and they did have some good runs. You know, you look at their two running backs, both those tailbacks average healthy yardage. I think
Carter had a 30-yarder and Lynch had a 23-yarder. But I mean,
like in terms of per carry average, both of those guys were up over 6 yards. One of them had 7.9, I believe, and the other one had 6 something. But some of the penalties, there was a lot of offensive line penalties. The right side of that offensive line struggled today, and there was a lot of moving parts. You had Finch over there, as you mentioned. You had Brocious, but then you also had Stanton Ramil over there with Lepo, and then Baldwin was over there a little bit. So it's kind of tough on the road in the Big Ten to be like moving guys around, and even that second or the was the second driver, the one that was like the one that was Child's first interception. I believe that was Stanton Ramil and Dallas Fincher were on the field at the same time in that drive, and that was like, you know, it was a long field because I believe it was like one of those where they had to come out, but it's different. Fincher, Brocious, it would have helped them if they had played last week, and but yeah, they've got to be better on the offensive line, and I think one of the more impressive things with Childs today is he overcame like some of the 15-yarders like that you didn't need to have.
Yeah, one of those 15-yarders, they came back on a 2nd and 23 for the touchdown.
Jerron Glover's touchdown, right?
Yeah, 34-yarder on a skinny post, I think, to Glover. Yeah, you know, Childs came back on that one for sure. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, and there was other ones as well. You know. And those are kind of things that you can get better at, and I think you can rep your way out of. But Michigan State has got.
Brocious had an illegal blindside block. That was one of those, which is kind of a gray area of interpretation.
I believe Lepo was like lined up.
Not on the line of scrimmage. He was. You know, you got to be within how do they term it? The base of the center, and the center is basically his butt. You got to be on the plane. You have to be on the plane of the center. He might have been a little bit back, and there's a tight end outside of him that was up. I've seen worse allowed to go, especially in the Pac-12, by the way.
Exactly.
So
I've seen worse in the Big Ten.
Smith mentioned his quote. You know, we had penalties, we weren't lined up. So he's not saying it was a bad call or whatever. I guess you learn from that or whatever. But Lepo's a new starter in Game 2, and he's had some good moments and some shaky moments. He's got the potential to come around, but. He's got to come around, you know, and he's getting some pressure there from Stanton Ramil doing some good things as a second-string left tackle. Can Ramil swing over to the right side, or you just keep going with Baldwin?
I tried today.
And you know, Baldwin over there a little bit, so that's a work in progress. A continued competition there as well. But, yeah, some of those penalties, Michigan State overcame a few. Talking to Mark D'Antonio down here in the end zone after the game.
That was fun.
He was talking about Childs. He said, what did he say? He said that guy, he extends plays.
Yeah, and he said that
as an old defensive coach, he knows that's difficult to play defense against a guy like that.
He also intimated that he didn't have a guy during his career. And I thought that was the most impressive thing. He said maybe Lewerke a little bit, but he didn't have a guy that had the combination of wheels and arm that Childs has. And D'Antonio's eyes lit up when he was talking about him because as a defensive coach, he knows how difficult it can be to defend against that guy. One of the things that Childs does a really good job at is he's able to throw on the run. For a young guy, that's not always easy, but he's able to throw a tight pass with a lot of velocity on the run, and that is really hard to defend against. And I still think he's trying to figure out, because he hasn't played a lot, but he's still trying to figure out how to use his legs, how to, when a play breaks down in the construct of a game at the college level, and it's not easy. But I think as he learns how to run, he's going to be pretty dang impressive. And
he's dangerous. He's dangerous, man.
He is. When you talk about the depth on the offensive line, there's other positions that you really look at. Michigan State had a great win today, but they're one injury away from being in real trouble. Even at wide receiver, you've got Montorie Foster, Nick Glover, or Nick Marsh out there making plays, but Ron Glover's on the sideline, and then you have.
I'm not sure what that injury was. Did you see it or hear what it was?
No, but he was on the bench. It was like, I don't know if he got his bell rung or what that was, but he didn't come back in. Antonio Gates Jr., who hasn't gotten any traction in training camp, and frankly, I thought was in a place where he was on a downward slope. Now he came in and he made
little shallow cross, check down,
and that was good.
Game-winning drive.
But before that, I thought, he didn't fight enough to stay in bounds on a play that was on the sideline. I thought he got pushed out of bounds way too easy, and he didn't care.
On a reception of his?
Not on a reception, but like on a route where Childs was looking his way, and I felt like
he got pushed out of bounds.
He didn't fight that enough, and to me, I'm not saying he could have made the play. I'm not saying he would have, but to me, that's kind of a body. It's one of those negative body language type of things that you look for guys to have competitive fire, and maybe the reception he gets, maybe the opportunity is gonna like springboard him ahead.
Yeah.
But they need him because Michigan State's really got four receivers right now. And
Yeah.
Isaiah Johnson played a little bit last week. Maybe he comes along, but he didn't have a good game today. He made a couple questionable decisions on the goal line as far as kick returns. And K'Ron Lynch-Adams was back there after Isaiah Johnson got them backed up for their second kickoff return. But so you look at the depth chart in the offensive line, you look at the depth chart at wide receiver, and there's not a lot of guys out there. Montorie Foster had to make plays. Nick Marsh had to make plays. Who's after that?
Yeah, there's not many. And Antonio Gates is a guy with ability. It's a question whether that pilot light is completely lit. And it's always been a question for him, even back in high school. And he's a kid who loves life and loves people. How much does he love football? That's what we're trying to find out. That's what the coach is trying to find out. And he's got ability. And at the end, he was thrown in there, and he caught a pass and made a play.
But the one thing that, you look at what you see from Michigan State, you see guys playing for each other. That's what I want to see from Antonio Gates because this is his third year.
He can help this team.
He can, but he's got to play for his teammates. He can't worry about I'm not getting reps, so I'm not gonna go as hard as I can in practice.
And I don't know if that's the case.
Listen, we've seen enough practice to see where he's been where the coaches have been getting on him Courtney Hawkins has been getting on him for effort-related things. I know that Courtney Hawkins trusted him enough last year to have him in the rotation, and that Antonio Gates could block pretty decently. He graded out pretty well at that. So the effort stuff, you've got to have that to play for this program. And I feel like so much of kind of the me attitude has been washed out of the program. So hopefully that continues, and Antonio Gates is a guy that can get on the Lord's bus and has correct change.
All right, yeah. And something I was impressed with about Michigan State today is just the brand of football on offense. There were a lot of openings. Like last week, they had trouble getting receivers open. And I mentioned in the pre-snap read that Maryland's weakness was their defensive backfield. Michigan State's receivers last week got locked up by Florida Atlantic. And today, even on the two interceptions, those guys were open. And there were some other ones where the offense was getting people open. Maybe not wide open, but, half a step open on a regular basis. Run game did some good things. That first long run that Carter had was an outside zone. And I mentioned in the pre-snap read that Maryland, they dominated UConn, but UConn clipped off a couple nice plays on outside zones. I mentioned the pre-snap read. I don't know what that means, and I'm sure that Maryland will be working on it, but keep an eye on that because that's a linchpin staple of the Michigan State offense is the outside zone, and Maryland better get it solved. And the first time Michigan State ran it, it broke out for about 30 yards. Ran it the very next play, gain of 6. Michigan State has some things on offense that make you defend the entire field deep and the entire width of the field. And they do it with a lot of old-fashioned stuff, with some new, with some modern twists to it. And they were springing openings. And if I'm someone who hates Michigan State and I'm watching the game today, I'm like, crap, man, they got a pretty good outfit put together there. I'm not saying there's a great team this year, but you can just see that I like the brand, Paul Konyndyk. Good brand of football.
Lynch Adams on I think it was a 3rd and 4 on one of those scoring drives. Early in the first half, he had a really decisive run where he made a nice cut in the hole. It was really firm and it was well blocked up, and that's something that we've seen Michigan State try to run the ball in years past and something like that. In the last couple of years, they would have never picked that up in that instance, and it just was like it was one of those things where coaches talk all the time, defensive coaches talk all the time about how it's hard. It's really hard to defend a team when you don't know if they're going to run or pass on 3rd down, or they have the ability to pick up either. Whether they're running or passing. And there's times where you can see Michigan State develop the potential for them to develop into that. Now, a lot of it's going to come down to injuries, how guys develop. We know that Mahalchuk is a really good coach. He does a nice job on the offensive line. So guys that struggled this week, the jury's still out on them, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them take steps in the coming weeks. But I really like a lot of what I'm seeing, and I think the defense, even though they didn't statistically have the game that they had last week, in some ways they played just as impressive because they were still salty. Even on that first scoring drive, it took Maryland 11 plays to go down the field, and Michigan State put them in a situation where they had to convert 3 3rd and 8s. It wasn't easy. And then the question that you asked to Jonathan Smith was about the zone defense switching to that. And, Rossi is a guy that will switch things up based on if it's not working. He's not going to bang his head against the wall. He's going to do what he needs to do. He said that earlier this week. I'm going to put the coverages in that I need to win the game. And he did do that. And Michigan State responded on defense.
Yeah, Michigan State began with a lot of press man-to-man early going, and Maryland went deep 4 times on that opening drive. 3 were wide open, and the guy overthrew him 3 times. 4th one, I consider it deep. It's a 15-yard slot fade. It's kind of a deep pass, and got it for the touchdown to Felton.
That was a perfect throw, too.
So 4 times they did it. Yeah, he's a good quarterback, Edwards. So 4 times they were deep, but the rest of the game, Michigan State's like, okay, we're not doing press. Well, at least the rest of the half, no more press. It was zone, a lot of cover 4, kept it in front, and, like Smith said, make them earn it, give them a long field, make them go 8, 12, 10 play drives. So Michigan State changed it. Then in the second half, they mixed it up a little bit. There were a couple times when they showed press and then walked it back at the snap and might have played cover 2 behind it. And then a couple times they stayed in it. But like at that time, maybe Maryland was thinking they're not going to stay in man. But a few times, Michigan State did some combination stuff with some 2 deep zone and man-to-man underneath when Felton was getting open. One time against Nakai Martinez on a 3rd down. Michigan State's like, well, we're going to give them a combination and see if we can match up with that guy. But he's a tough matchup. Felton can fly. I mentioned that in the pre-snap read that he's a good one. And Prather's a good one, too, and they kept Prather kind of quiet. But Michigan State changing the look just enough. Michigan State had one miscommunication on the touchdown on the wheel route. That was a combination coverage. There was some zone at the linebacker level and zone in the 2 deep, or I think 2 deep. But it was man-to-man with Brantley on a corner, the corner against wide receiver, clearing it out, and that's what cleared up all that space on the sideline. So it's a combination coverage. You got man-to-man there, leak out of a wheel, and Turner hesitated and finally went with him, and it was too late at that point. So one time there's a miscommunication. Last week there were 2. Michigan State played some different players too. Jeremiah Hughes, the transfer from LSU, did not play last week. He was not in pads. He was in a jersey on the sideline. He was in pads today, and he played in the second half at corner. Michigan State was having a little trouble with, and Rucker got dinged up a little bit. So he went in and didn't look like I saw any negativity out of him, negative plays from him. Second string safeties today. Today it was Nakai Martinez and Malik Spencer the entire game, with Angelo Gross playing mostly nickel, but he played a little bit of safety also. In pregame warm-up, Denson, true freshman, was repping as a second string safety along with legend Cavazos, the transfer from North Carolina. They didn't get in the game that I saw, but that safety situation, that's kind of thin too. It was a position of depth coming into the year, but with Dylan Tatum out and Amarion Smith not ready yet. Smith was asked about him, and he said he's coming along. He was in pads today, was not in pads last week. And, of course, Khalil Majid being injured as well. There's a position of depth, but it's thin there as well. But if they can avoid the turnover, or the injury bug, which is almost impossible in college football. But this Michigan State team right now that's going to get better if they can keep everybody together, they're gonna play some competitive football this year, Paul.
Yeah, and I think
some more competitive football.
The other thing that Cal Halliday was talking about, and I think this helps when you're plugging in guys in, is that there's not a lot of finger pointing. Everyone's pulling for each other, and for like when Amarion Smith does come back, because I think he's probably getting closer. I mean, it's just a matter of like how much can you go through the week and have on your plate. That's what it comes down to. The fact that he was on the sideline today was a big deal in my opinion. That they trusted him with a travel spot, and then so look for him to come back soon. But it helps when everyone wants you to be successful, and you see that at linebacker. You got guys coming in, and everybody's making plays. Wayne Matthews, Darius Snow today making plays. That was impressive, and just everyone's kind of pulling for each other. So I think when you're plugging in new guys into a system where there's an opportunity for people to make plays and everyone's got your back, I think it makes it easier. But that's always an issue for a first-year program. And going all the way back to, we mentioned D'Antonio earlier, but you think of back in 2007, they didn't have a whole lot of depth. And as injuries, they got a couple injuries here and there. It really changes kind of the metrics for what you can do as a football team. But right now, Michigan State's in a really good place. And I'm not saying they're ahead of schedule, but I did not expect them to win this game. This is one of those games, like for the last 3 years, we've been talking about like Michigan State winning games against teams in their peer group, and prior to, since that Peach Bowl year in 2021, Michigan State has not been able to win these games. They moved the football in Maryland each of the last 2 years, but Maryland ended up dominating them statistically and on the scoreboard because they couldn't get the plays that Michigan State got today in the second half. They couldn't get the stops on defense. They couldn't get special teams plays. So maybe Michigan State is a little bit ahead of schedule. I don't know, but they're competitive, and it kind of feels like what it felt like in year one for Mark D'Antonio. Like where I think they started off really fast. Now Michigan State's got a brutal schedule this year. But these guys got to keep on chipping away at the rock face. But this was really satisfying if you're a Michigan State fan, because there hasn't been a lot of meaningful games for Michigan State fans when Big Ten play starts. There hasn't been a meaningful game like in Big Ten play, it feels like, since the Peach Bowl year, because everything has been, we get our butts kicked by this non-conference opponent. Maybe we can bounce back, but don't. And then it feels like you're kind of climbing uphill the rest of the season. So to get a win like this early is huge. Not just for the team and the chemistry, but also for Michigan State fan psyche. And I think it'll be cool to see those guys fans respond when games return to Spartan Stadium.
Play design and play selection so much better than what we've seen in the last few years. Just a different level of
checkers and chess.
It really is. We got a text from our good friend, correspondent back in East Lansing, Ricardo Cooney. He was mentioning along those lines. This outfit, a lot of the stuff they do on offense looks old-fashioned, but there's a modern West Coast bent to a lot of it. It's pro style, it's NFL stuff, and it's tricky and it's good. Some of it's not unlike some of the stuff Harbaugh did the last few years, and it's an interesting way to play. And Michigan State played well today, and the victory puts them, ahead of schedule, a touchdown underdog, and a win like this puts you on schedule. I think they are ahead of schedule for now. It makes a bowl game more realistic at the end of the year, a win like this. I know it's just 2 games and a long way to go. This reminds me of Saban's first year when they won at Illinois. Illinois had Simeon Rice back then. They were a very good team. They were a preseason top 20 team, and Michigan State went on the road and got a big win on the road. Illinois did not end up being that great that year, but that was more in the middle of the year, maybe game 4 or 5, something like that. But a win like that puts you ahead of schedule in terms of trying to get to 6 or 7 wins to get into a bowl game. Right. That's what that did for that year in year one of Saban. And if Michigan State gets to a bowl game this year, there'll be more wins to come. But this one not only goes in the win column, but it's a sign, it's a barometer that they're going to show up and slug with a lot of teams this year.
It helps you so you don't have to be where Michigan State was the last 2 years, where you've got maybe 3 winnable games in your last 5, and you have to win every single one of them when you're beat to heck after playing like the Ohio States, the Michigans, and those type of teams. And then, you come up just short because there's other teams in the conference that look at you as a winnable game as well, and so that helps out, because there's gonna come a point this season where Michigan State loses a game that they probably should win. Whether it's maybe, but depth-wise, whatever. From whatever reason is out there.
Do you mean like you're looking at a winnable game right now, or do you mean like they go toe-to-toe with Oregon and then they lose?
No, I'm talking about like later in the season when they play a team like
like Illinois, Indiana, Purdue.
Yeah, something like that, because those aren't gimmies. I'm not talking about the next two. Boston College is no gimme either. So that helps out with. If you lose to this outfit and you lose to Boston College, then you're in a situation like Michigan State's been the last few years, where you are looking at, okay, these are the only teams that we can beat to get to a bowl game, and so it's a good thing. But Michigan State's growing, and like Smith is a program builder, but he said from day one that he wants to be competitive, and I think they will be competitive. But he also wants to go to a bowl game, and so does Alan Haller. So if that's possible, that's great. But they took a big step in that direction, big picture-wise. But as far as they're concerned, it's all about the process.
Yeah, I feel like this is a really big win, not only for the season, but just for the window of the future.
And for the program.
Michigan State fans to
for
see
the program overall,
about,
man. Because Michigan State fans haven't had much to celebrate. This is the second game of the year. You're playing a Big Ten opponent, and you're not buried under 500. So psychologically, this is a huge victory, and it could play into bigger themes down the road. But
and that brand too, they tackled well, changing up on defense a little bit, doing some good
things. They didn't luck into anything today. They're fortunate in a way to make some plays, but they deserve to win this football game because they outplayed Maryland in all three phases.
Maryland had trouble stopping Michigan State. Michigan State stopped themselves with those 2 interceptions and so forth. I don't think Maryland walks off this field thinking that, man, we were the better team. They might have thought we could have, should have won, but I don't think they walk off thinking clearly that they were the better team. They weren't. Michigan State was good, did a great job. There was some, with the Prairie View game coming up, when the schedule first came out with Michigan State starting a new season, new team, new era, all that, at one point I thought it would have been better to play Prairie View first and then ease into FAU and then Maryland. But as it turns out now, you play Prairie View, which is probably going to be kind of like a scrimmage. But it gives you a chance to work on Brocious some more at right guard. Get Lepo together at right tackle. Hey, man, you settle down. It's going to be all right. Get Childs in the groove a little bit more. Is Gates going to be a part of it? If I don't know what was wrong with Glover today, but if he's like a week-to-week thing, let him sit out. And, you get Legend Cavazos in there, second-string safety. You bring Jeremiah Hughes together at corner. I'm not sure what's going on with Rucker. But it's a scrimmage, but you can also work on some individuals. So whereas I thought it would have been more advantageous back in August to think playing them first, coming in game 3, I think it's good for this team.
I think you also got to work on getting Jack Belling involved. That's a guy that he had 3 catches today. That's a good step in the right direction. And I think Michigan State did a nice job of trying to get playmakers involved. They went to Montorie Foster right away. They tried to go to Velling and whatnot. I think they did a really nice job with, Brian Lindgren is a good offensive coordinator. He is a good play caller, and
I like that stuff. Don't you like that stuff? The way they do
stuff?
And
man, why our guy Rico Cooney is so excited about this is because half the plays they're running are like updated, cool versions of the crap that he used to run at U of D Jesuit.
That's right.
So shout out to Rico and U of D Jesuit. But, Michigan State with their zone, they had a lot of third and shorts, right? And, like in the Hazleton defenses and whatnot, those third and shorts were almost guaranteed, to turn into first downs. Maryland would be like, hey, we got to, and Maryland's a good team on third and short, like with their passing game and whatnot. I think Michigan State did a really, really nice job in the second half of, keeping those guys down before the sticks. And that's kind of reminded me of what D'Antonio defenses were, good tackling in space, guys rallying to the football. No one standing around to see what was going to happen. I thought that was impressive to me, that 3rd and 3 lots of times turning into, 4th and punt.
I thought Childs did a good job on some of those play-action boot rollouts, looking at the second level a little bit more than, throwing in completions deep. I thought he was there. Michigan State's offense was presenting him with some open layers on some wide receiver drags and things like that. He wasn't always connecting with them, but it just seemed to me like he was looking at that second level, which is open once you establish a run game.
Big game for him.
Yeah, Childs took some steps. Michigan State football is playing some real football, a brand of football that'll be fun to cover and fun for Michigan State fans to watch. We appreciate everybody checking. Oh, I should say, hey, give us a like here on the channel, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to SpartanMag.com. We'd love to have you over there. It's going to be an interesting season, and I think a lot of more good moments to come as the season progresses. Michigan State got a big one today, workmanlike fashion, resiliency, believed, and represented Michigan State football well today. So congratulations to the Spartans getting it done today. Anything else, Paul? For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. You've been watching the VCast from College Park, Maryland with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com.